and it's all pre-taped.
Oh, hi, I'm Diane Crash, live from not my living room, and I'm not really live, but I am here today with Kitty Clark Stevenson. This is a show by and about Arlingtonians and for Arlingtonians, and it's a little glimpse at some of the special people who make this community the great community it is. So I'm delighted to be joined by Kitty Clark Stevenson. Kitty, how did you get a name like Kitty?
Well, blame my daddy. My father named me. He didn't like the name Kate. He didn't like the name Catherine, but he loved Kitty. And I just like to remind people, when you grow up with a name like Kitty, you learn to fight at a very early age. It comes from this, here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Well, you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But I'm older now. I've matured greatly. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother.
Right.
So I'm multi-generational, and I really do know how to behave.
There you go.
That's how I got it. What was interesting is that in my elementary school, which was a segregated elementary school, they knew that, quote unquote, we had nicknames, but we also had some names that were kind of unusual. When I went to Swanton Junior High School, and I was the integrating class for Swanton, the principal required the vice principal and the counselors to call me in because I needed to bring in a birth certificate. And I was like, I'm born, I'm here, I've been here a good little while, my family knows who I am, but you're supposed to write your name. I said, well, I did. We're not talking about your nickname. What is your name? And I said, Kitty. That's it. That's how you spell it. Well, we're going to have a conference with your parents, and we need to have your birth certificate. I know I don't look like an immigrant, so that wouldn't have been what it was about. But be that as it may, my mother said, I'm not going to take the meeting. Tell them to send me a letter, and I'll see that they get information. That is your name, you know your name, and we're not changing your name. I did ask my father to change my name when I was younger because I got tired of fighting with everyone teasing me. And I was of the generation that loved Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. And so I wanted to change my name to Dale Evans Clark. And my father told me, well, we have to go down to the courthouse and we have to file the paperwork and then you can change your name. I said, okay, let's go. And he said, no, you have to pay $10 to get your name changed. And I went, what? Well, you know, I gave you what I wanted you to have. If you want to change it, you got to pay for it. And that was my first lesson on you get what you want when you pay for what you want. So I still have Kitty. So I never got the $10 together to go down there to do that.
Well, Kitty's a great name. You wear it well. And I was a big fan of Roy Rogers and Dale Evans too, except I wanted my name to be Roy. So, but that's another conversation.
That's fair. That's fair.
But let's talk. You mentioned Swanton, and if I'm not mistaken, Swanton was the second school to integrate after Stratford, which was the first.
At the junior high level, because correct. Stratford and then Washington Lee and then Swanton kind of slipped in there. That was sort of like
can you talk a little bit about what that transition was from a segregated school to the integrated experience of Swanton?
Sure. Strange. I'll start there. It was strange because I was in the last class at Langston Elementary School, 6th grade, where we were actually given the option to go into the integrated school because the county was converting, or to go to Hoffman Boston. HB was the junior high, the senior high school for the Negroes. And we bused from all over Arlington County to get there to do that. And that was a cool school. Had the cute boys, the great teachers, the great counselors. And that was the school that I wanted to go to. But my parents told me, the county's converting. Sooner or later, you're going to have to end up in one of these integrated schools anyway. So you're going to start now. And there were about maybe 4 of my classmates who did decide to go to Hoffman Boston. And I caught up with them again when we got to Washington Lee. And so again, by the time that conversion finished, we did kind of all get there together. My younger sisters, they actually went to Woodlawn that turned into the hospice location, and then it became part of the HB Woodlawn program when they closed HB. So I've just seen all these different transitions. When we get to the name changes, I just get so tickled because one of my aunts, along with my older siblings who went to Hoffman Boston, goes, well, what happened to our school? That was our school. You know, they keep changing stuff. Did they erase us? Did they get rid of us? And to just see that those people that were like legends in my household, whether they were teachers, administrators, or counselors, I didn't have the benefit of that. And I always kind of felt badly about that piece. But getting back to Swanson, the strangeness of all of that, I really felt like I was losing a part of what would have been history in my family, what have been something I would have looked forward to. Some of us there on Halls Hill were excited when we would go down to HB because they could be cheerleaders. Even the sports, as you know, were still segregated through Jim Crow. And so they couldn't play in the leagues together. They couldn't cheer. A couple of the young people that would have been cheerleaders, even in Langston Elementary School, even in my older sister's generation and all, once that integration started, they weren't even required or even eligible to be considered to be required to take that as an extracurricular activity. So just a lot of things that you develop 6 years in elementary school to look forward to just have that snatched away without any kind of discussion, any kind of preparation. It was hard. Internally, though, the community, I think, did an exceptional job. Halls Hill, same thing would have been true for Green Valley, the same thing would have been true for Johnson Hill. Worked very, very hard along with our churches and leadership and our citizen associations and all to kind of try to help prepare us for that. I can remember there was a physical education thing, and they got us a school bus and they took us to, I now know to be Kenmore, but I had no idea. Never even heard of any of the other elementary schools in the Arlington County Public School system because we were restricted to our two schools, Langston on the north side and Drew on the south side. And so to know about Kenmore and Taylor and Nottingham, those things weren't even on our radar. You know this about me, Diane. I'm pretty much of a self-advocate type of person. So I'm going to try to work it out the best I can and make it work the best that I can. So I never really complained a lot about it, but I didn't like it. I didn't like being put on the school bus and going to somewhere that they told me was an Arlington County Public School, and I'd never heard of it before. I'd never heard of Kenmore. And they took us in this gym and we had to sit over in this isolated area. Maybe if they put all third grades together or all fifth grades together or all sixth grades together, maybe that would have felt like more that we are all in the same school system. But even though they were trying to do something, I still don't remember what they might have told us they were trying to do, we were still separated and isolated.
So how about, you used the phrase separate and not equal earlier, and I'm assuming you're mentioning or relating that to the quality of the materials and school buildings, et cetera, for the Black population was not as good as it was for the white population. And then here all of a sudden you're integrating without, and you're it's not a level playing field.
It really wasn't level, and that's what also made it strange. As I said, in something I did, whenever it was I did it, and we were talking about the integration in the schools and things again, I told them, our books were never the new books. We got schools from Arlington County Public School System, but we had to clean them up. We had to erase them. We had to get out the cuss words. We had to do all those kind of things. We had to get out the nigger things and all of that kind of stuff. We had to get it out of the books before we could even study. So like your first day was going through the book that was assigned to you and seeing what needed to be cleaned up. And if there was something that was inappropriate, and we knew what things were kind to be inappropriate because it wasn't part of the lesson, we had to bring it to the teacher's attention and a decision would be made. Do you replace my book because it's so damaged that you can't use it, but you had to cut out, or things that people had colored out or cut out portions of the text all kinds of things. So that was a headache. But the sort of comparator piece that I dealt with, raising my hand, having the answer, my answer, and I can just remember this incident so well, would have been to C. The answer, when she called on the white student to answer the question, he said, observe. That was his response. And although both answers would have been correct for the context of what the question was,
Right.
observe never came to my mind. And I knew that word.
Sure.
Okay. And those are the things when you engage with teachers to challenge the students, to kind of frame it for you. You know, Kitty, yeah, there's several ways you could have answered that question. Let's talk about the different responses that still would have been correct.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things that happen every day, every class in our segregated elementary school.
Right.
Because they were preparing us for the wider world, the bigger world, the broader world.
Right.
And that would be different for us when we got there, okay? Unless we chose to come back and commit to the community and work in the community. So whether it was our doctors, our lawyers, our dentists, our teachers, they would have had the credentials, the education to make different choices if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But what we valued so much was coming back to our community, because I think of the linking, one hand going forward to catch and one hand going back to catch, so that no one really was left behind.
So let's talk about, that would be the community of Halls Hill.
Yep.
And Wilma Jones wrote a terrific book about that community a couple of years ago, and she was in the library. So tell me a little bit about the ability of that community to kind of hold everybody up. I love your metaphor of the hands linking.
Yep.
How important was that community? A former colleague of ours here at the library grew up in Halls Hill, so I know a little bit about Halls Hill. But there's something about the closeness of that community that I have not heard any other person, white person, Black person, speak of. So can you tell me a little bit about what created that sense of shared community and purpose?
You know, as you look at how things have sort of evolved, maybe over the last 35, 45 years, when we began to get a sense of roots and cultures and where we came from, regardless as to how we're all here in the country right now, a wider understanding that it really does take a village to raise a child.
Right.
And to protect all of the children in the village. Even though we didn't talk about it in those terms when I grew up, we knew everybody on every street. We were raised to always respect our elders. Everyone was always Miss, Mrs., or Mr. And they, quote unquote, took care of what you needed, as well as correcting behavior that was unacceptable for the community. And what was unacceptable for your parents. So even though we all learned how to cuss, as my mother said when they would call her, I heard your child on the playground cussing. And my mother would say, well, I'm sure they know how to use it. I'm sure they know what it means. But thanks, I'll take care of that.
Yeah.
But you got reported on.
Right.
You even got spanked, which means there were two, because they'd spank you because they know your parents wouldn't permit it and wouldn't allow it. And then you got it when you got home. So you always learned how to know where those boundaries were. We also had a very safe community that I could walk. I grew up from where Virginia Hospital Center is now building that new building. Over there on that lot before they turned it up is where I learned to roller skate. And I still got the break on my knee to prove it, but be that as it may, I could go from literally the hospital all the way to the McDonald's across from Fire Station number 8. And when I grew up and was old enough to be permitted to go out of the yard on my own, it was safe for me to do that. And I could take all the streets where Heidelberg's is now. There used to be a corner store where you get a pickle and a bag of potato chips and a soda, and then run across and go to school there at Langston. So, you know, we just learned how to do those things. I could go to the playground right there between Dinwiddie and Cameron Street. And if I had to go to the bathroom, we didn't have bathrooms. We had a lot of woods. I hate to tell you all the things we did in those woods around the playground, but we also had relatives on both sides of that street. I used to tell people, if you stand in the middle of Dinwiddie Street near the playground and just yell Clark, you're going to get about 5 doors that are going to open.
Right.
Because we just grew up that way and we took care of each other. We knew families. Those of us that had the larger families, the Joneses, Wilma's family, there was a large number of them. The Clarks, my family, there were large numbers of us. We used to laugh about, we don't really need to get anybody to be on the team because there's enough of us for most sports to be our own team. And you just learned how to play together to deal with that. It was safe, you were taken care of, your behavior had to be quote unquote proper or corrected. And that was an understanding that you would do that. You were not allowed to hurt, you were not allowed to abuse, you were not allowed to be touched.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who it was.
Right.
And those are the things that you always had to tell. And the other thing that was really great about growing up on the Hill is that you were believed as a child. The one thing that I remember as a child, there was a situation where to have white people driving through our neighborhood was not that uncommon, because that's how a lot of the services that we got, whether it was the insurance man,
Right.
who would come in and sell the insurance policy, most of the produce folks, fresh fish, watermelon, whatever those things were, there were generally people that were Negroes who were doing the business, whether they were doing it for them and their farms or doing it, quote unquote, fronting for other farms. We didn't know because they were riding through our streets. The other people that were the white people that rode through the community were the frosty ice cream people.
Oh, yes, I remember Frosty.
Yep, have mercy. Banana split. Now you're gonna make me go find a banana split today. That banana split, I knew what my favorites were. They drove the trucks and they did that. And the good humor men were generally also white. So
Right.
they'd still come through the neighborhood, they'd sell it, but they weren't our people, but they had ice cream.
Right.
And the popsicle was still less than a nickel. I remember that.
Yeah.
But those were the kinds of things, but it still made it a safe community. But there was a white man in a blue car. If I think about it now, I might have said it might have been something like maybe a bigger Chevy or an Oldsmobile. And this white man apparently was picking up young Black boys off the hill. They kind of get disappeared for a while. And the next thing we know, the police were knocking on doors. Did you see it? Did you see the truck? Did you see the car? Can you describe what you saw? And so there was this real period of one summer where we couldn't go anywhere alone.
Sure.
We always had to be accounted for.
Yeah.
And then you would see those neighbors, instead of hearing you cussing, if you will, they were standing in the door to monitor you as you walk through the neighborhood.
Of course, yeah.
And basically say, she's cleared this location, she's cleared that location.
Yeah.
So those were the things that still made it safe, even when weird stuff like that happened.
Right.
But it was home. I love it. I'll always love it. And I'll always fight for it. So ergo, Fire Station number 8.
Well, let's talk about Fire Station number 8. There was a little bit of controversy about it a few years ago. We don't have to talk about that necessarily, but your father was also a trailblazer. And maybe the first Black battalion chief, certainly in the county.
Well, let me back up a little bit, because the first battalion chief in Arlington County was Battalion Chief Dale Smith sometime in the 80s or 90s.
Okay.
Okay, so we're a generation away before we actually had a battalion chief. But the controversy, a little might be the way you describe it. It almost burned down the city, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'm aware. I was just trying to kind of ease into it.
Thank you for the gentle introduction of the matter. But the whole idea was that all of the communities around Arlington had the volunteer fire stations.
Right.
So Cherrydale had its, South Arlington, whatever those names were, had its. It was another Negro community down there where they ultimately built the Pentagon and all of that, and Freedman's Village and all that, that also had, I think it was called East Glebe. See, now I've got to go back and think, but that was a volunteer fire station too. So we literally had 2 Negro volunteer fire stations in the county. the one on the south side down there where the Pentagon and all that stuff is now, but also on the north side where Halls Hills is and still remains. Now, that whole idea when the controversy about moving Fire Station 8 8/10 of a mile, I kind of remember that fact being measured, it just didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. I won't even go to sort of like those factual considerations that didn't make sense in my head. The Highway Alliance and taking a look at Lee Highway and how it's projected to be changed, and you're getting in density with more apartments and townhouses and ... Why would you move it from the area where you know you're bringing in more people?
Right.
That was the first thing that just didn't make sense in my head. And then I happen to know, having grown up with my father and the fire department career that he had, the response times were bogus, the way it was being presented. We have these agreements, these multi-jurisdictional agreements in this public safety arena, that if the fire is there in McLean, Fire Station 8 is going to go there. It's close. If there's the fire that's there in Alexandria, Fire Station number 7 or number 10, they're going to go there. Those kinds of things just sort of play. So to make it sound like it had to move 8/10 of a mile just to get to that northern part of Arlington County heading toward Chain Bridge, we're going that way all the time when we go fight fires in Fairfax. What are you talking about? But anyway, it all boiled down, quite honestly, to a lot of internal things that were part of that segregated Jim Crow history that we were living in the community, that we dealt with in the schools, that we dealt with the Arlington County government. Having worked in Arlington County, coming on board in the early 80s as the first time full EEO officer responsible for developing the EO policy and the affirmative action plan. It's been revised. I revised that before I retired from the county, but doing that for the first time in the county, I was in the understandable position of learning an awful lot about the history about race and employment and hiring in Arlington County government. Now, having lived it through public safety, the segregated fire department there at Fire Station number 8 was one filter. But to have also been informed and told that we actually had a former county manager, whose name I don't even recall at this point, had the position that when they tried to open up jobs in the courthouse, meaning white collar versus blue collar and trades, that this particular county manager said, I'll never have any of those ends, fill in the blank, working here in the courthouse. And I don't care if they have to dig every ditch in Arlington County. They're not coming up in this building. And that was such a clearly known and articulated fact about the denial of employment opportunities to work for Arlington County government, that when I was getting ready to try to find a job, a career, my father asked me, did I want to work for the county? And my answer to him was, I don't intend to work on that plantation. Wow. And that's how I felt about that. And he said, well, give him a chance. I said, I'm moving to Massachusetts. But anyway, that's another whole story. But I kind of said, no, they don't want us. We don't want to be treated or go somewhere where we're not wanted. And we still kind of laugh internally about the fact that the first time a Negro was hired to work in an administrative job in the Arlington County Courthouse, it made the Washington Post.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, wow.
In 1967.
No kidding.